Okay. Hello again, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Sohaila Bana, and I'm with West Contra Costa Fire Safe Council. I really appreciate your coming. We have some important presentations today, so I'll try to make the announcements brief. And sorry for a low distraction as people are joining us in the room. So the first announcement is about East Bay Wildfire Coalition of Local Governments. The next meeting will be on February 27th at 9:30 at El Cerrito City Hall. It's going to be a hybrid meeting. I will share the Zoom with you as soon as we receive it. The other announcement is about a town hall on wildfire safety that Supervisor John Joya and I are organizing. Some of you are already invited to attend as speakers. It's going to be on March 8th at San Pablo City Hall. Again, another hybrid meeting. We try to come up with a central location for West Contra Costa County. I wonder if there is anyone from Richmond Fire Department who would like to talk about the open house on May 17th, or should I announce it?
We still have to have a planning meeting, but good morning, everybody. Aaron Osorio, Fire Chief, City of Richmond Fire Department. We can announce the date on May 17th. The fire department, in partnership with the Fire Safe Council, will host the first ever Wildfire Awareness Month open house at Station 63. This is the station that's on Valley View Road in Amend. We still have to have a planning meeting to determine all the participants. There's a draft list of participants we would like to invite. I think some of them are already committed. But as we get the plans finalized, we'll make sure this gets out to everyone. And our goal is that this is an annual event that's held there. We chose that location because it's the future home of the demonstration garden that's going to be installed. And so it'd be a good location to host this event at every year because there will be the Firewise or Fire Safe Garden, demonstration garden there that community members can look at and get ideas on how to better landscape their properties and their homes. So we'll make sure that the flyers get out once we finalize everything, but it will be on Saturday, May 17th.
Thank you very much, Chief Osorio. Really appreciate it. And last announcement is that Chief Osorio and other city leadership team members are collaborating with some city council members, including myself, in an ad hoc committee to enhance wildfire safety. So if you have any specific concerns, please feel free to share them with Chief Osorio or myself. Thank you very much. And with that, we are going to move to our first presentation about a countywide evacuation plan. So we had initially requested an evacuation study similar to what Kensington had done. Measure X kindly approved a budget of $500,000, but then they learned that Caltrans and CCTA are doing it. So they dropped the plan, and CCTA and Caltrans are doing it because as a member of WCTAC, I brought up the issue that they're improving the roads, but the road capacity needs to be proportional. The evacuation capacity should be proportional to the population density of the area around it. And fortunately, they listened, followed up, and initiated this study. So with that, I'm going to ask John to please start the presentation, and let me make sure. Yeah, you should be able to share your slides. John Hoang from CCTA, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. John Hoang, Director of Planning for Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And thank you, Selena, for bringing this committee to my attention, this board. And thanks for having me today to present our efforts to do a countywide emergency evacuation plan. I have a short slide deck which I'm going to share. And you should see it now. Let me know if you see it.
Yes, we can see it. Go ahead, please.
Right, thanks. So again, Contra Costa Transportation Authority, as you know, we're the countywide transportation authority collecting the sales tax revenue from all the sales within the county, and we receive roughly about $100 million a year for various transportation related projects. And we felt that one of the projects that was available to us to apply for was to do a countywide emergency evacuation plan, and that's what I'm gonna tell you today, how that ties in with our day-to-day work and how it ties in with the cities and towns and the unincorporated county that we work for. So this grant is from Caltrans.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Somehow I'm unable to mute everyone. Can I ask everyone to please mute their mics? Some people are complaining they cannot hear the speaker well. Could you please all mute your mics? I don't know why I don't have control over mics. I apologize for the interruption. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. So the Caltrans District 4 released a call for projects, which they do every year through their Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant program. And there's a couple of different categories within the grant. One involved climate adaptation. So last January of 24, CCTA applied for a evacuation planning grant. And just to give you a little bit of background why we did this was because I had some communication with city and town in the La Miranda area that they were looking to do something at a city level to address some of their local concern. And one thing led to another, and then I know other regions, like especially West County, East County, Central County. There is other regions within the county that has the same issues, tackling the same challenges during not only fires but other emergencies. So we decided, we meaning CCT, we decided to let's open this up to a countywide effort, and thus we submitted the application to Caltrans. And again, the main purpose of the grant itself was to address public health, air quality, social equity, economy, reduction in GHG, right? Because it's all transportation related. So the grant was roughly 1.5 million. CCTA will contribute roughly 208,000 with the total project amount of $1.7 million. Again, just to reiterate, this is for the whole county. We're going to focus on the vulnerable communities, which I've kind of mentioned earlier already. Each communities have their own challenges. And oh, by the way, for those who agencies, I know County OES and a few of the fire districts submitted to us a letter of support. So I just want to, I don't have those lists in front of me today, but I thank you again for your support letter that you did contributed to our application. So going back to the plan itself, we want to look at neighborhoods that lack network redundancy during evacuation scenarios, and also look at the resiliency of the infrastructure. Make sure that it's resilient enough to meet the needs of the evacuation, and then afterwards come back and be ready for the next event. We want to build on the local hazard mitigation plan. As I was developing the application, I realized that there's a countywide effort already for the LHMP stuff. So that's a great to know. And I know County OES, Rick Kovar, with I've discussed with him a few frequencies already about this plan, and I think we can leverage the effort, the committees, the stakeholders that have been involved with this effort to help with the evacuation plan. The plan addresses two deficiencies: the state statute SB 99, which looks at the evacuation compliance assessment, and then AB 747 looks at the route itself, the capacity, the safety, and the viability of the evacuation route. We feel that this county has a wide variety of needs, so we know already coming in that we're going to be addressing different things for different regions. These are some of the hazards we focus. I kind of tend to focus on wildfire a lot, but there are also other hazards out there, either climate induced or human induced, just like sea level rise, levee failures, landslides, tsunamis, and of course near the refineries, the there's some potential for need for evacuation during refinery accidents. During all these events, as you all know, you're in the business of first responders. There is um, there's a strain on the network, not only transportation but other networks. So, having this plan prepared uh, with all the stakeholders, I think is very important. As you know, oh no, I don't need to emphasize that. I mentioned earlier my communications with Lafayette and Orre kind of jump started this whole effort. And here we are with the with success with the grant. Now the grant does have some guidelines which we met for Contra Costa. Uh, 50% of the grant should benefit underserved communities, and that's just kind of described there places where there's a disproportionate rates of economic, environmental, and health burdens. I actually use a different terminology in my past presentation, which was kind of brought up to me. I use EPC in case you're from, you know what it is, economic priority communities, which is not quite correct, but the correct terminology is actually underserved communities. As part of this project, I envision a lot of public engagement, a lot of stakeholders engagement, and that's going to be a lot of the budget that we will account for. The region, the county is wide. There's even at the CCTA level, we divide our region, our county into four separate regions, almost five depending on funding. So there's no difference in our approach for this project where we're going to divide the region, the county does, I think, five sub-regions now, and then evaluate up to 6 emergency events per sub-region, and look to prioritize and do some cost estimate associated with these scenarios, and then develop some funding strategies to identify some funds and resources we could pursue. This is the scope of work that I'm working with Caltrans on. I'm still working with Caltrans on to get the agreement in place, so that's why we're on a holding pattern now. But the scope is really to develop a technical advisory committee. A stakeholders, public outreach will be a major part of this project. Again, assess the network resiliency, and also looking at additional infrastructure assessment needed to complete the plan. I'm going to pass on this slide. Let's see, this is my last slide. So one thing I want to mention again, that as soon as we receive the go-ahead notice to proceed from Caltrans, we're going to bring on expertise consultants, because I certainly do not know this topic well enough, but we'll bring some consultants on board and help usher this project through with your help and with all the stakeholders' help. Schedule-wise, assuming that we can start the project this first quarter of this year, we should be completed in June of 27. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
John, could you please show the map slide? I think that's important.
Okay.
Emphasis areas.
Yeah, so this map, I kind of alluded to earlier. There's another map. So this is the equity priority community areas, which is important also, but there's a underserved communities, which uses different criteria. If I overlay that map over on this map, a lot of these areas will kind of overlap. But just to be
West Contra Costa County plays an important role.
correct,
A
yes,
lot of weight. Thank you.
there's a lot of good stuff going on in the West County, to say the least.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We're short in time, but have time for a few questions, if any. Anybody has any questions at this point? No? Okay. Jim Hansen, go ahead. Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just curious, I was looking to see an objective. I mean, the obvious issue is congestion during emergencies. And will the study provide some specific strategies? It talked about funding priority areas, but specific strategies. Thanks.
Yes, it will. I didn't call it out specifically, but there will be strategies on how to evacuate and capacity, taking into consideration road capacity, the different methods of evacuation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I will try to bring updates through these meetings as we move on. We'll be in touch with John. Thank you very much, John. We appreciate it. Next presentation is by Rick Kovar from Malu. I see your hand, but let's I want to make sure we receive all the presentations before we address all the questions. I hope John stays with us to the end, so could answer other questions if there is extra time. But I would like to ask Rick to please have a presentation about the local hazard mitigation plan that was just finalized. Rick, please.
Yep.
From the County Office of Emergency Services. Thank you.
See the slides?
Yes,
Sure.
go ahead.
Because I can't see it on my end. Hopefully I can forward the slides, but I can't see it. Anyway, let me just walk through this quickly. We've already presented earlier in the year or last year on the local hazard mitigation plan. So just to give you an overview, this plan, while not required, is something that the county has to maintain every 5 years to qualify for a variety of grant potential. And so the local hazard mitigation plan is a federal, or it allows us to get federal funding to work on either pre-disaster mitigation programs. So things like if we want to increase drainage or retrofit critical buildings, things like that, there's funding available if you have an approved plan. So we did get our plan approved. The county plan got approved in November. And then FEMA just approved all of the we had 16 cities and 24 special districts as part of this plan. And I'll walk through those real quick. But what that means now is each of those jurisdictions has a timeline to have it approved by their local boards. Once the local cities and special districts get it approved by their local boards, then they can start seeking funding for disasters. So this, can you see, does the slide say planning partners? Okay, cool. So West County, El Cerrito, Hercules, Panola, Richmond, and San Pablo are all partners on this plan. So they each have individual pieces within the local hazard mitigation plan and a few special districts as well. So West County was very well represented as part of this plan and will be able to partake in either seeking pre-disaster mitigation funding or in the event of a large-scale disaster. It also opens us up for access to other post-disaster funds. So County OES supported writing this plan and building this plan, but we will not be seeking grants for jurisdictions. Those are all the responsibility of the local jurisdictions and special districts to go out and seek those grants and manage those grants themselves. So we just manage the planning process, and now each of these jurisdictions will manage each of their individual projects. They all had to submit possible projects to FEMA for approval. So I don't have a list of those, but you can, if it's not online already, we'll have it online where you can see which projects with each jurisdiction that they put into play. These are really focused on natural hazards, but we also did put in some man-made threats. So all the same hazards everyone's familiar with: climate change, dam levee failure, drought, earthquake, flood. Those are all on there. What we found between 5 years ago and this year, the change in threats have changed logically. So wildfire, which was like 4th or 5th, is now number 2 after earthquake as a threat to Contra Costa County. So we did see some changes in our threat potential at the county level. I think I mentioned this before, just this is my soapbox whenever I get in front of electeds and or other special interest groups. I want to talk about the FEMA National Risk Index. If you guys on your own time Google FEMA National Risk Index, you'll see Contra Costa County is in there. There's 3,007 counties government entities in the United States, 3,007. Contra Costa is the 14th most at-risk county for FEMA for natural hazard risk. So anything and everything that we do in preparation and mitigation is absolutely vital, because we are an extremely at-risk county when you compare it to other counties across the country. And here's a slide that shows that. So obviously LA County, number 1, we just saw in January why they're number 1 at risk. But we are, I think 14 out of 3,007 puts us in a place where we really need to be investing a lot in our disaster resiliency preparation, community preparedness. Things like the evacuation plan that's coming are all vitally important, because it's on paper, it's been blasted out there. We are a very at-risk county. So all the things that you guys are doing as a committee, and there are things we do here in each of the agencies across county preparing for, is absolutely vital. So this is a quick update of the risk. So you see wildfire went from 4 to number 2, earthquake stays the same. We've increased information around some of the other things. And so all of being able to identify what our risks are helps us with our planning process, and then also to be able to go out and seek these mitigation funds that are out there. Just in the interest of time, we'll speed things up. So some of the new things that are going on with the local hazard mitigation plan is now we'll be, instead of every 5 years, we'll be going out annually to update this plan. Going to each of the cities and jurisdictions that are part of this have to go out to their communities annually and assess their risks and come up with changes or additions as we go annually, as opposed to every 5 years. We only have to write the plan once every 5 years, but we have to make sure that it's up to date annually. So you'll be hearing a lot more about the hazard mitigation plan locally because of these new requirements. Just quickly, not necessarily for you guys as a JPA, but for the cities and special districts, there are a series of grants out there that are coming up that you probably want to look at. The BRIC grants, which are the Building Resilient Infrastructure, hazard mitigation, and there's 2 hazard mitigation grants. So for those cities and special districts that are part of the LHMP, you want to start looking at those and making sure you don't miss any of those deadlines. With that, I know you've got a lot on your agenda, so I don't want to take too much time, but any questions? I do want to shout out to all the jurisdictions that participated in this. It was a heavy lift. I see Richmond's on here. Each of the cities that are those 16 cities and special districts all basically had to write their own mini annex to the whole hazard mitigation plan. So it was an organizational heavy lift, and we couldn't have done it without the help of a lot of the people on this call that worked with their jurisdictions to get us over the finish line. So I want to thank everyone for it.
Thank you very much, Rick. I would like to urge everyone to please put in the chat their name, agency, and contact information. Thank you, Harpreet, for doing that. I'd like to especially ask the speakers, so if there are any questions later on, the residents and also other members of the advisory board could contact you directly if there is not enough time. But at the end, we'll try to get back and have more discussions if there is time. Are there any questions at this point for Rick? I guess not. Okay. Yeah, we'll have more discussion at the end. At this time, I would like to ask Chief Ed Orre from CalFire to please share with us his experience, knowledge, wisdom from LA fires, which is very important to all of us. And I think it was a game changer in terms of the policies and everything, California wide and perhaps nationwide. Ed, please.
Well, okay, thank you. First off, I wasn't on any of those fires down there, so but we did send a number of resources. We sent engines, bulldozers, crews, and numerous overhead, and our helicopter down to that fire. I'm going to do a little recap. I'll be a little bit more general, but there will be more detailed reports coming out as the data is being processed and facts are collected. But the fire started on January 7th. And when the first fire, the Palisade fire, started, we weren't in red flag warning at that time. The initial dispatch.
Sorry for interruption, but I wonder if it's you sharing, or do you have a slides sharing, or
No, I don't.
who's currently sharing? Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully I can just
yes, please
narrate this. But I think it's important to note that when those fires started, the weather was not very unusual. It was reported 67 degrees, 37% relative humidity, wind 9 miles per hour, and gust to 19. Not unusual, not anything that we would be concerned about for this time of year. But when the Eaton fire kicked off at 6 p.m. on the same day, by then we had red flag weather conditions developing. Temperatures were still only 65%, but the RH had dropped to 16%, and winds were picking up. So as the days followed, things only got worse. And so let me explain a little bit the setting down there. So most of you are familiar with SRA lands, the state responsibility lands, and local responsibility, and then there's federal responsibility areas. And there's also what's called DPA, the direct protection areas. So sometimes local government will cover some state responsibility and vice versa. They trade acres and so forth. So some of that applies down in the LA basin area. And then many of you may not be aware of this, but there's contract counties. There's certain counties in the state where there is no CalFire presence at all. LA, Ventura, Santa Barbara, Orange, Kern County in the south. And then the only county in the North Ops is Marin County. So what the state does is they pay the local county fire authority to provide protection for state responsibility areas. But whenever there is a fire in the SRA lands in those counties, CalFire does respond like we would anywhere else, because we are still ultimately responsible. So for CalFire counties, we have Blue Book staffing, where we primarily provide wildland fire coverage through the more critical months of the year for fire season. Well, we had just laid off about half of our staff or more in the middle of December. And so when the fires kicked off, we were by no means at full staffing. And I suspect that's the same for the contract counties. I think they would have laid off much of their resources too. All of that is in what's called the gray book that specifies staffing levels at different times of the year. Now, whenever there's major fires, the various mutual aid agreements kick in, and so resources came from all over the state and other states, as you probably heard in the news, so that they supported LA County. We sent down right away our incident management teams. CalFire has 6 teams statewide. We sent IMT 2 to the Palisades fire, IMT 3 to the Eaton fire, and then about 2 days later, when the Border 2 fire started in San Diego County, that grew very quickly, and we deployed incident management team 4 for that fire. Now, we currently have incident management team 5 and 1 down in LA County in a support role, assisting Cal OES with logistics support primarily. Each CalFire IMT has 62 standing members, plus a secondary supplemental roster. So it's a very big undertaking to deploy a team. And then we have another team on hardcover there now. We also sent what's called ECC support teams that helps with ordering supplies, people, equipment, all those various things. We sent down damage inspection teams who are trained up to respond very quickly. They produce those numbers that you see in the news of how many structures were destroyed and damaged, etc. And then we also sent a WERT team, WERT. That's a watershed emergency response team. And we often do that for big fires. What the WERT team does is they assess the burn severity of a given area and then develop a list of values at risk, like where there's homes, businesses, critical infrastructure that could be damaged by the following winter. So the fire may not have caused damage to some things, but we know that as winter storms come, further damage could likely occur. And the WERT assessment documents all that. And the WERT team is made up of CalFire foresters, California Geologic Survey geologists, Department of Water Resources hydrologists, and several others. And that WERT report, or a WERT report, is now available for the Palisades and the Eaton fire. And they coordinate that with the local OES and their city services and county services to prevent things like, remember the Thomas fire? So following the Thomas fire, we had those atmospheric rivers that caused the huge mudslides that killed many more people and inundated Highway 101, etc. So the WERT report provides some heads up for the possibility of those type of events. Now, when we're down there, you know, our priority is first, the strategy is protecting life, and then property, and then environment, in that order. And being as those were wind-driven fires, we really can't do much to stop the fire itself. So it was all about evacuating people. And pardon me?
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'd like to ask everyone to please mute your mics. Thank you. Sorry, Ed, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so our priority was to assist with getting people out of harm's way. And there really wasn't much that could be done to stop the fire once the winds picked up. So we focused on evacuations, helping people shelter in place, those sorts of things. The incident commanders, they developed those strategies, and then operations folks developed the tactics. And some of the tactics include like triaging structures and seeing where we can make the biggest effect. And if you've never seen the WUI guide, I would encourage you to take a look at that, because there's a lot that homeowners could be aware of to help themselves. For example, our fire engines, our wildland engines, only hold 500 gallons of water. And our typical tactic is that we will spend no more than 200 gallons per structure. If we can't save a structure with 200 gallons of water, we'll move on to another one that we can. So out of the 500 gallons, that's 2 houses, and then 100 gallons to protect the crew. But if a home has a good water source, if it has like a ladder on the roof, a safe area to fight a fire, and it's escapable, our crews will stay a little bit longer. We'll risk a lot to save a lot, but we won't risk much to save little. We have different tactics that we use, like check and go, prep and defend, fire front following, bump and run. These are all things in the WUI guide that we apply in these kind of situations. It's very different than your typical little brush fire, your typical structure fire. But in the coming months, I'm sure there will be some very detailed reports coming out, kind of like what you see the National Transportation Safety Board do for big like airline crashes, things like that. There will be some very solid lessons learned coming out of this, no doubt. The incident management teams do produce a AAR, after action review, at the end of their deployment, but I think the things you'd be interested in are yet to be released. So.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If you could please share in the chat the link to the WUI guide you mentioned, or if you could email it to me later so I can share with the community.
Yeah,
that would be great. So we do have Chief Bachman from our county fire marshal and deputy fire chief, who actually has been there and is going to share with us his observations and what kept homes. So I have some questions for you, but as I said, we'll keep all the questions for then. So Chris, if you're here, please, could you start talking about what you observed in LA fires?
Sure. Hi, Chris Bachman, Assistant Chief and Fire Marshal with Countywide County Fire. I deployed 7 days into the incident as one of the public information officers. So as a PIO there, I was just one of over 50 PIOs that was assigned to the incident. And the reason they ramped up so much, as they got into the incident was when we got there, I think there was still something like 28,000 people that were still evacuated. So as it was very strategic getting those areas released, Genesis, or previously Zone Haven, was used in identifying zones and releasing those zones and making sure everybody understood what their zone was, because that was the platform that was utilized, and that was how we informed people to what zones was released each day at noon, who could go back into their neighborhoods or into their to assess their homes. As Ed mentioned, it was very beneficial with the platform that the damage assessment inspectors were out doing, because a lot of people knew ahead of time whether their home was still standing, what percentage of damage they had to their home because of those DINS inspectors that were out doing that damage assessment and providing it on a website through, I think it was called LA Recovers, that they were able to go and see what the status of their home, and actually a single picture from the front yard. If I could share my screen here, let me see if I can get to just a real short presentation I put together that's going to show some photos of some of what I was able to witness. Let's see here. So if I come up here and hit play. This device. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so again, these are just my observations that I was able to see from the Palisades fire. So this area here is Palisades Highlands. It's kind of the northern portion. If you look at it on a map of where Pacific Palisades is the downtown area, Pacific Palisades Highlands is kind of the north subdivision. So, by being able to look at the maps that identified, so red means greater than 50% damage to the home. Yellow and white identified a different percentage, and then if it was black, it was undamaged. So as you look, you'll see, different scenarios, and I'll show some pictures and show a little closer, but wherever it kind of, the edge of that subdivision, especially, you'll see the terrain, it was very steep on some of these ridges as it came up into these subdivisions. Some of them, depending on the spacing of the home, that's when it caught one house on fire, it just went from house to house to house. Again, you got to remember the type of winds they were experiencing of 60, 70, 80 mile an hour. Some of this also depends, when did the fire reach a certain subdivision or certain area versus others. I know that's all currently being evaluated, but I think this gives a good perspective of, as you see that, not every single home was lost. And I think a lot of this did have to attribute to, what is that defensible space like? What was zone 0 like? Of course, the ones that were on the edges of the subdivision, right to the open space, had the greatest threat exposed to them. But just because you were, we'll say, several blocks in, did not mean that you were still not at risk or still had to be concerned with the ember cast or the direct fire impingement. Here's a larger lot that, and this house, I know the house to the right, as you see, is completely gone. You can see the chimney still standing. But just another great example of zone 0 being implemented, where they had, the concrete sidewalk pretty much all the way around the house and kept their landscaping, greater than that 5 foot mark, along with, the newer homes that were built there, because that is a very high fire hazard severity zone, are required to comply with that 7A type construction, which has a lot of the regulations that Ed was mentioning that's listed in the WUI code for certain size vents, the non-combustible roof, siding, and this house went one step further and did implement zone 0. And I think it's a great testament to, you could see that on some of the homes that were able to survive. Larger lots did have spot destruction. So, as you look down the street, you'll see the lot to the right was, burned. The house was gone. The car in the road even burnt. The one to the left, same way. Car in the driveway burnt. Lot burnt. But you'll still see the green grass. And then you get down the block, and you'll see some other cars that are still, intact, and their houses were intact as well. And it just really, was a great example of going up this hill where spot fires were just occurring from lot to lot. But on the larger space lots, you didn't have that structure-to-structure ignition. But again, really goes back and shows the importance of making sure that you've implemented your defensible space around your home. Another example of a large lot with a 7A construction next to it, but just a single spot fire where one house on that corner caught fire, but the other ones were was able to withstand. I think it's also interesting when you look at those tall cypresses, there was about a 15-foot space between that row of trees and that house to the left of it with the stucco. But that construction type, the double pane windows, were able to withstand the radiant heat that house was putting off. This is that example of, where you saw the ridges of the edge of the subdivision that kind of was right up on that ridge looking down into the valley. And that's where it was just one after another, those homes didn't survive. But you'll see in the distance, down in the bottom, a lot of the homes were still standing. And that's where you still had spot fires and individual homes that would be gone throughout the subdivision, but you didn't have the devastation of every single house in like a row of 20 of being gone. Just another example looking down into the valley. So a lot of different change in elevation. I felt this. So I was standing up atop of a hill next to other homes, but you could see the different layers as you look down into this valley. And if you look on the right corner, kind of that first row of homes didn't survive. But as you got into the subdivision, that's where it was just hit or miss on the spot fires. And if you go into LA Recovers and look at the, you can actually see the damage inspection reports like Ed was talking about, and see similar to what I've showed, where you have the different color dots, and you'll see the patterns of where a lot of homes were gone versus the spot fires is what lost homes more in the middle of the subdivisions. Here's a good example of this house. So that I left the blue garbage can in there for reference because this house is side by side. You'll see the blue garbage can. This is how they were, kind of positioned. But if you'll notice the type of vegetation and how close they have the vegetation around their house, look at the house on the left and the vegetation just to the left of the garage that's burned, and how all that large bush or shrub is completely gone. The vegetation to the left of the house is all burned up, and the house is gone. Where I wouldn't say the house on the right is completely compliant with Zone 0, but at least the tall trees are up higher, where that vegetation that could burn is at least over the roof. Now that's not compliant with Zone 0 or even the 0 to 30, because you're not supposed to have those overhanging your roof. But this was a house based on the type of construction and how they had their vegetation. What it did survive versus the neighbors did not. These are another great examples of older construction homes, but where Zone 0 played a role. As you'll notice, the front yards of both of these houses burnt. They were about a block apart, and the leaves, everything is completely burned off those trees. But just based on that spacing from where that vegetation was to the house, the houses are still standing. The one on the right was an older home as well. Now, what it's not showing is going up, then there was a retaining wall and it dropped down, and that was a sidewalk that went around the front of the house. So all that vegetation on the front side of the home burnt, but the landscaping didn't go right up to the home. It was about a 5 to 6 foot separation between where the vegetation stopped and where the home was located. I didn't actually catch this until after I got home and was looking at pictures, but it did catch my eye as I was driving down the street that here's this whole row of homes that behind their houses, and this is a street, and you can see it was as I was driving up the street on the right side of me, it burned all the way up the hill, jumped the street, ran up this hill, but it stopped at all the homes. It didn't catch one of those. Well, not one of those homes burnt down in that whole row. And as you look at it, and I was able to zoom in, kind of the common denominator on all those was there was no wood fences. There was either concrete retaining walls, or the first three houses there on the left all have metal fences that are to the open space or to that vegetation. So there wasn't that as it burned up the hill, it catches the wood fence on fire, which then leads to the house. Just another great example of that. I know there's been a lot of discussion on, if Zone 0 is implemented, why should I have to take my fence, at least the connection of where my fence connects the house? I think these are great examples where that wood fence was not there to then to get over to the homes on this hillside. Here was another hillside with no wood fences. As you can see, the cypress trees, the palm trees, everything burnt going up the hill. But that entire row, there was not one home lost all along that entire row, because it was either, depending on the steepness, had a concrete retaining wall within their backyard. If their yard was flatter, then it was metal fences that backed up to that open space. This is moving further down into Pacific Palisades. Pacific Palisades is kind of where the downtown area is. And this is where you saw a lot more devastation of structure-to-structure ignition. Some initial reports that have come out did identify the closeness of the homes. And as you'll see, it was literally just went from lot to lot to lot that caught these homes on fire. And I think it'll also be interesting to see when the time difference was on what the winds were between Pacific Palisades and Palisades Highlands. But it's too early to tell until those reports come out. But when they do, I think we'll be able to really evaluate these areas better to identify, what were some of the other contributing factors to why there was just such a heavy loss in Pacific Palisades. But there was some one-offs. This was about 3 blocks from the downtown area. I think within about a 2-block radius, every house was completely gone, except for this one. And just, a newer style home. So as it was built, it would have had to adhere to the 7A construction standards that are in place. And just absolutely amazing that that home was able to withstand the amount of fire that went through this neighborhood. If you'll notice up on the top level to the left, the glass is even melted off the deck that was for the railing, but it still wasn't enough. And the bottom 2 windows, it did break the first pane of the window, but the double pane window, the second pane still stayed intact, keeping that fire from getting into the home. This is down closer to the ocean in Pacific Palisades. When you notice there's a couple on that previous map I showed, there's a couple one-off black dots where some houses did survive. And again, the common theme, it was a newer style home that had either been completely remodeled or had been rebuilt and utilized the 7A construction and was still standing. Again, I'm not saying that just because it's a 7A construction, it would have withstood the fire, because I'm sure there were homes that were 7A construction that did not survive. But of the ones that you saw, the one-offs that were still standing and everything around it were gone, it was usually the newer construction homes. Just another view looking down the streets in Pacific Palisades. So since then, on February 6th, an executive order came out that was signed by Governor Newsom, identifying that, and you can look this up, or I can share this executive order with Sohila, she could pass it on since this is fairly new and it just came out. Since it's identifying that the Board of Forestry shall post a pre-rulemaking draft that needs to be done within 45 days of this order. So to go through the public comment period, but the goal is to have the formal rulemaking process in place no later than December 31st, which is going to talk about implementing Zone 0 regulations. What does this mean? I don't know, but in the next 45 days, we should be seeing what those regulations are going to propose, as far as, is it only going to be the very high? Is it going to be high as well? A lot of this is going to be drafted in the next and presented in the next 45 days according to this order. But I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of this executive order that just came out last week, along with identifying that starting no later than February 10th, the LRA maps are supposed to be starting to be released throughout the state for the LRA. The next page just shows when that's going to be. And for the Bay Area, we are February 24th. We are phase 2 of that implementation. So today, phase 1 was supposed to be released, and we are phase 2. So that was really all I had. I'll continue to, follow the research that's being done on this, all the reports. I have probably over 300 photos and videos that I took as I went into different neighborhoods and had an opportunity to really assess the area. It was a great opportunity to be able to serve in the role as PIO and really be involved in the repopulation of approximately 28,000 people, and how it took almost a full 2 weeks to repopulate that area. So happy to stay on the call and answer any questions with the rest of the group, and hope this information was helpful.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. We really appreciate it. And I hope we can have one more meeting with you, a Zoom community meeting, perhaps with more pictures, more information just for the community. We only have a couple of minutes to the end of the meeting. I'm going to use my privilege and ask an important question from Ed and Chris, if one of you could answer, please, about SRA and LRA. SRA is determined by the state. How is LRA defined? What is the process? And you mentioned the state pays money for LRA. How much is it? And you also mentioned direct protection area. What does that mean?
Well, it gets a bit complicated, but the state responsibility area are the unincorporated areas and areas not covered by fire districts, where the state pays for the firefighting cost, the suppression cost. Conversely, in LRA, local government pays the cost. So even though everybody may show up from all different jurisdictions, ultimately who foots the bill is the LRA. We go through an annual review, make adjustments, working with our local partners, stakeholders, to adjust boundaries. So there's a formula where, as more and more structures are developed, or cities, districts annex an area, then we take it away from take it away from SRA and put it into LRA.
So if LRA is expanded or is shrinking, what are the implications for the residents in that area? Is it to their advantage or disadvantage? Do they get more budget, incentives, or only their insurance rate goes up?
There really shouldn't be any difference. Like I said, when a major fire starts, or any fire starts, everybody goes. It doesn't matter whose jurisdiction from the landowner's perspective. So it may, so like in Contra Costa County, if a fire starts, Contra Costa Fire District is going to be there immediately. And if it's an SRA, we will dispatch at the same time. If it's a LRA fire in Contra Costa County, then we'll receive a phone call saying, "Hey, can you help us?" And boom, we're there. Typically the dollars, the cost is handled later on.
Thank you so much. It's 1 o'clock. I always brag about me ending our meetings on time, so our guests know that we only take 1 hour of their time. Thank you so much, everyone. I would like to especially thank the speakers, and thank you so much for all of you for attending this meeting. I put my email address down there. If you want to link to the recording of the presentation, please email me. I'll share the recording with everyone. And we'll meet again in 3 months, second Monday of May at 12 noon here again. Thank you, and see you in 3 months. Meanwhile, we'll be in touch by email, and we'll be collaborating together. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What the heck?
So no time for questions?
Please
Comments?
share your questions with me. I'll share it with the speakers and get back to you. Thank you.